Today, we become legends.
Oh yeah, it's that time again. There's been some pretty major meta shifts and a new god since my previous entry in this series, and despite the fact that the new season isn't far away and will almost certainly warrant another update, I thought I'd bring you guys my top 3 gods for every role for carrying ranked right now. As always, this list is based on a combination of my own experience in Masters Ranked, general community perception and pick ban rates, as well as SPL performance, although for this update there hasn't been any serious SPL, just the All-Stars and Roll Stars events. But before that, what would you say if Fafnir finally got a skin in Smite after over 3 years? Would you say it was the Call of Dragons? Well, you're in luck because that's today's video sponsor. Call of Dragons is a new fantasy 4X strategy game with an open map of over 3.88 million square kilometers, which are packed to the brim with behemoths that you and your guild can endeavor to take down. If you manage it, you can recruit that monster to join your roster and fight alongside you and your guildmates in future battles. Speaking of guildmates, joining a guild is a huge part of Call of Dragons as it allows you to fight with friends to take down stronger behemoths than you could on your own. Here's my guild in game if you want to join up. Now, I'm sure you're itching to get into the action, so head over to the link in the description or scan the QR code on screen and start your draconic adventure now. But without further ado, let's jump in with the jungle role. So first up for jungle we have Thor, who in the previous entry filled a solo spot for the list but was still absolutely strong in the jungle. In the last month or so he's moved into the jungle a lot more than solo, and while he's still really strong there, I felt it best to put him in jungle for the list. It's where he sees more play at the moment. Thor is still Thor. Sure, he lost 3 power from his passive and 10% scaling on his wall, but that won't stop him from half-healthing you with a stun double tap or 80%ing you with his full ult combo. If you don't have beads, Thor can annihilate you with very little counterplay, and that combined with his global presence makes him an excellent jungle pick at the moment. Next up is a returning face from the corridors of the jungle with Kali. And that's Kali. She remains the highest win rate and highest pick ban rate across all ranks right now, and while her win rate has fallen off a little bit since last time, falling off a bit from a 66% win rate means she's still outperforming basically every god in the game at any rank. She is simply the best hyper carry in the game, at least from the jungle role. Her passive healing was nerfed, but she still has that essential quality to her of, if I get past 20 minutes without being irreparably behind, I just win the game. She can practically solo teams with her insane single target shred, can be invincible for 4.5 seconds and heals 60% of her health on a target kill. Kali is still insane right now, and if you can live with yourself after doing it, just spam Kali anytime she's not banned, which is understandably not too often. The last slot was a bit more contested in my opinion, as 3 strong junglers all sort of warrant a top 3 placement. Ao Kuang is basically Kali, but he carries a bit less hard but has an execute. Thanatos also has an execute, dominates early to mid game, and even does pretty well late game nowadays because of the insane amount of power and pen available, making his AA cancels hit like a truck. But ultimately, the god I chose for the final spot is Susano, due to his slightly higher potential to outright carry a game if you're good with him. Susano's damage output once he gets 2 or 3 items online is just insane, and his high mobility allows him to jump into and out of the enemy backline with ease. He's a little harder to play optimally than your average assassin, so if you don't feel like you have a good Susano, Ao Kuang or Thanatos will do just fine for you right now, but I think overall Susano is stronger. Moving into solo lane though, first up we have Wukong, who since the nerfs to Raven is arguably just as good, if not even a little better than the Demon King. His laning phase is pretty much the freest of any solo laner, with excellent wave clear from a safe distance, good poking, and he's basically impossible to gank if you play correctly due to his 3 and ultimate. He's also super simple to play, which helps literally anyone pick him up and win, even if you don't play solo much. The god pretty much plays itself, and while his teamfight late game is a little weaker than some other solos, his laning phase allows him to easily get a lead and rotate to make a huge impact in the mid game where it matters. Next up is of course Raven, who despite some nerfs remains strong. His item usage is the key highlight really with him, making excellent use of many top items for solo lane like Bluestone, Pribwin, Binding, Spikes, even Frostbound Hammer if you swing that way. His max HP shield was nerfed back to where it was prior to year 10, but it's still over a fifth of his health that he can use to nullify enemy poke or have extra tankiness when diving the backline. Complete immunity on a 10-second cooldown also helps, especially when diving mages. Raven remains strong despite the nerfs. And finally, another familiar face, we have the world serpent himself, Jormungandr. If you're looking for a magical solo right now, he's your guy. He's far and away the strongest guardian for solo at the moment due to his laning phase that, much like Wukong actually, is completely free. He has very few bad matchups, and if you're losing lane on Yhorm, you're probably doing something wrong. His totem and bastion pressure with his 1 is insane, and he's near impossible to gank due to his ultimate. Speaking of the ult, in teamfights the disruption and chaos this ability provides is exactly what a solo laner needs to be doing late game, and his resistance to displacement CCs makes him a great counter pick into certain gods as well. Yhorm is a force in the meta right now and makes the enemy solo laner build weird too against him, which helps a lot. Quick honorable mention to Tia, who is still strong in my opinion, but definitely not stronger than the 3 I've mentioned here. Moving into the mid lane though, where a new type of build is emerging that could storm the meta. The Tablet Book Breastplate build is making a comeback since the buff to Book of Thoth in 10.8 and the nerf to most mage power items in 10.6. And our first mage abuses that build perhaps the best of any, and that's of course Merlin. His 3 stances with 6 basic abilities plus the ult makes his proccing of Tablet and Reaver just insane. Plus he enjoys the extra health and defenses from Tablet and Breastplate since he's fairly vulnerable in teamfights. Once his blink is burned, he's just relying on relics and self peel at that point, so having an extra 60 physical defense and 150 health is really nice for him. And aside from the new build, Merlin still does probably the highest raw damage of any mage in the game. Give him some setup CC or sick him on an objective and he'll get the job done faster than almost anyone else. Next up is Agni, who remains a top mid laner despite the build shifts. He actually does great with both kind of build, as not only is his power scaling very high for a standard power and pen build, but he also has effectively 6 damaging abilities he can throw out in a fight to proc Reaver and Tablet, since his 1 does 1 tick of damage before detonating from bombs and his 2 proccing item effects. Agni's kit is also just very versatile with high overall damage, AoE CC, and the ability for most of his damage to go over walls with his ultimate, great for jungle teamfights in the late game. Agni remains a top 3 mage in 10.8. And finally we have Janus, who in the right hands can be a devastating force in the meta. Despite not using the new build very well because he relies mainly on a huge burst of damage from 1 or 2 abilities, you can just build Janus the same way you always have, with max CDR and Gem of Focus, and do work for your team. The global rotation potential, the slippery safety he has, and the one-shot potential of ulting through a wall into 2 means Janus will always be a scary threat to any team. A little hard to play optimally, but insane when you can do so. Quick honorable mention to Morgan Le Fay, who is also really strong right now. She uses the new and old builds both quite well and has a ton of versatility in how you use her kit, while being actually one of the safer mages in the game due to her 2 self-heal abilities, long duration CC immunity and % health heal. Hey, just jumping in here to say if you're enjoying the video so far, don't forget to drop a like and subscribe to the channel. I make informational guides like these all the time, as well as tons of other Smite content, and liking the video is the best way to help more people see my stuff. Thanks. But moving into the other carry role, the first ADC we have to mention is of course Matikaras. Yes, nerfing his ult by 5 base damage and 3% scaling per hit wasn't enough to take this fundamentally broken god out of the meta, especially when 2 of his core items actually got buffed in 10.8. His combination of great safety through lifesteal, movement speed, and of course the ult, as well as great effective range, especially on his 1 and 2, make him super hard to get on and kill in fights, while he retains mostly insane damage numbers across the board. Until more nerfs come, I fear Mati will remain a top 3 ADC, and of course he plays mid almost as well, so if you want to use him there, go right ahead. I just don't typically include gods for 2 roles in the list. Next up is a brand new face though, and that's Freya. The Valkyrie Queen has seen a meteoric rise into the meta lately as people are starting to realise that she still does Freya things. She did get indirectly buffed when all mages got 40 extra free power to fix mid lane, but of course she's an ADC and so didn't really need this, but she got it anyway. She's also one of the strongest hyper carries in the game and has a surprisingly strong early laning phase due to her fast buff clear. But of course, she's somewhat of a ticking time bomb ready to wipe your whole team once she gets 4 to 5 items online. If you're an ADC main and you haven't been using Freya, give her a try and you'll see how insane she is right now. And finally we have a familiar face, and that's Hachiman. Since his buffs a while back, Hachi hasn't really strayed from a top 3 spot in the ADC role. He was nerfed a little bit, but is still fundamentally really strong. He's pretty safe due to his ultimate and ability to keep his distance while still dishing out major deeps through his 1, and is a very well-rounded ADC with a pretty strong laning phase mid-game and late game. He doesn't really excel at the top of any of those phases, but does all of them really well. And finally, last but not least, we have the support role, where my first pick is the new guy. Yep, Charon appears to be really strong right now that he's allowed him ranked. The shield on his 2 is straight up busted even after the nerf it got, and his teamfight is in the conversation for the best in the game when it comes to supports. The ult is unmissable and has one of the strongest CCs in the game while buffing his allies a ton, and of course that shield mark is arguably the highlight of his kit, providing health shields upwards of 200 to 300 HP to anyone on his team that simply hits the guy you marked. Charon definitely seems super strong in the meta at the moment. Next up is the Kappa King himself, who remains strong in 10.8. His disruption in fights is pretty much unrivaled by anything except an ulting Yhorm due to his ability to reset his cooldowns and the ult lasting for what seems like an eternity. He's more dive heavy but can also peel too and uses a lot of strong items really well right now, like easy prophetic stacks from the 2, Pribwin abuse, etc. Kuzan has been strong for a while now, so I won't spend too long explaining why he's good, but he will probably remain a top support until he gets nerfed pretty soon. And finally, my third support for the list is Ganesha, who I feel goes a little overlooked right now for how strong he is. He's rarely banned, but does super well into a lot of the meta. His silence destroys tons of junglers' dives like Thor or Kali, and his ultimate provides some of the best zone control for sieges and objectives there is. Plus, he always has the 3 to fall back on to stop pretty much anyone trying to kill your carries unless they have beads. The Elephant is definitely a top 3 support at the moment. And finally, a quick honourable mention to Horus, who remains good in the current meta, but just didn't quite make the list due to Ganesha being a tiny bit stronger in my opinion. They're extremely close though, and if you have a good Horus, he's still insane right now. But that's all I've got for the top 3 gods for every role in patch 10.8. Let me know your own thoughts down below, and I'll catch you in another one later on. Have a great day, and peace out, you nerds.